Woohoo!
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Meandering Session. I am one of your hosts, Kyron Wines, just kicking my bottle over here.
Your bottle over, one over here.
And this is a Meandering Sessions. We have a little fun out in the park, as you can tell by my little headgear here. It's a light-hearted. Very light-hearted, but still some deep conversations. And we'll start off with a little bit of the deepness that was happening this last week, which was the rain, the inundation. So if you checked out the last episode, you would have seen it in the actual video itself. Let me just make sure I'm speaking actually into the mic. So I've got my goggles on, so I'm prepared for any more rain that comes. But that was pretty hectic, man. I missed the floods in the 2011. Because I was actually working.
Oh, were you away during that time?
I was away in my vacation work. It was 2011, 2012, right? That's when the floods were. Yes. So, I missed all them. So it was pretty impressive to see.
Well, I wonder if people could, if you're actually looking at the video, I don't know if you could see it on your background, because you can see the water is still quite high.
You'll see that there is maybe a river in the background, but you won't see
you won't notice it. Yeah. So I don't actually know how high I got here, but I believe the
3
water
meters.
Got up here. So the water was up here where we are sitting right now.
Yeah.
So we're sitting right now. So if you can see the river behind us, the water was actually up here. Up and about.
Lapping at where we were. So
at our ankles. So
imagine if we had on that Sunday decided like, fuck the rain, we're gonna go out.
We're gonna go do it
no matter what.
That would have been horrendous. I also heard of a lot of people. So here in the city, Brisbane, where this happened, over in West End and a couple of other areas, they were living in apartment blocks, or where you used to live. Where you used to live in West End. They got flooded, like all of that place got flooded, especially all of the car parks in that area, and all the power went out across those blocks. Heaps of people had to go and move somewhere else and stay with other friends. So it was pretty hectic. I do remember 2011. This wasn't as hectic as 2011. It wasn't as high, so thankfully. Good thing.
You say that, but there'll be some pictures floating through as well of some of the boats piled up that you took photos of.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it was still pretty hectic. It wasn't like I was saying, it wasn't as crazy as 2011. It was still pretty ridiculous.
And look, it was yesterday I was at this very spot, just 100 meters down there, doing some handstands, and I was still seeing little tinnies floating by
down the river.
Yeah. So the river is still just washing up shit and just floating out to sea. It actually sort of reminds me of when I was in Mexico, and it was not too far from Tuxtla. I think it was Tuxtla Gutierrez. It's like Tuxtla.
Behind the microphone. It's
good. And I was there trying to just see things, see as much of Mexico as I could. And there was this river where you could go on a cruise down, and you could get to see monkeys and crocodiles and alligators, I guess. And it was just filled with shit, man. Just plastic bottles and random crap. The whole river, garbage. Man. It was really sad to see. And this is what this river is sort of
reminding you of.
So walking along the mangroves and whatnot, you can see just bunches of just crap piled up and whatnot.
Around.
Pretty hectic, man.
Living amongst a river like that, though, in general, man, that would be depressing. That would be depressing. If I lived in a location where
pure,
it was garbage like that, or it just was unkept, it just would make me feel down. I don't know if normally the environment impacts me that much, but that would impact me. For sure, just to be
for sure. I think there's been a bunch of studies just showing, even if you're sort of living in poverty, but you take care of your surrounding areas, nothing has changed except the scenic aspect of it, but your life quality just radically it'll improve. Your life quality improves when the area you're in is nice, and it doesn't make sense because it's just a visual thing, but the people get healthier, the people get, live longer, have less mortality, blah, 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 all the general life metrics, happiness levels and things like that.
I mean, I could envision that. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking work efficiency or effectiveness. I tend to work maybe better, faster if I'm in a space where it's almost conductive for me to be able to do the work. And it's the same reason why Facebook, Apple, a lot of these massive software companies now, probably lots of other companies, when they built a lot of the centers of the campuses, like they spent so much money to make sure that it was like absolutely perfect, so that people
pristine.
would connect. Well, pristine in one sense, but you know, if you're Steve Jobs sort of level, you wanted to make sure that like the amount of pane of glass you're using and the exact curvature is like exactly the right thing, but just so people can clash together as well. So I can understand
That's
it.
Well, I wanted to bring up one first, which you sort of just touched upon, which was work. And so you've got a new work, and I sort of like overheard one of your conversations, so I'm privy to the deepest, darkest secrets that is going on at your new workplace. I wanted to ask you a question about creativity in your work. So as you've been sort of, I wouldn't say rising the corporate ladder, you've more been like jumping from vine to vine. I feel it's more like your progression.
That's probably a more adept scenario.
He's the evolving ground monkey is becoming gradually airborne. A swinging monkey. And I wanted to question you about how much creativity you have in your role, because it sort of feels like the higher you go, I would have thought like you now have the power to be like, no, we're going to work this way instead of this way. You're the one telling people to do stuff now, and maybe you're being told less of what you have to do. I mean, you still have bosses and whatnot. So do you feel like overall you are able to be more creative in your current position, which is higher than it was compared to like grad level things?
I think so. I think there is more creativity in I guess in different ways. Maybe if I was to try and articulate it, I'd say that you can be more creative by the sense that you've got the control to like almost direct the way that it's going to flow. So in this example of either you're directing people what you're going to go down the path of, or how you're going to be working, or establish the working ways within a team or within a group. I guess that has more creativity to it, because I mean, if you're just a team member or an individual, you're kind of participating in those sessions, but by the by, it's people organizing things for you so you can work together. But there's like a particular path that you're going to take. And I think you're more so on the side of learning and doing very specific tasks that you don't get as engaged in the creative space. Where I'd say definitely more so now, my roles are more creative, in the sense that I'm imagining or thinking through what are the ways of working, how should people be working. I'm directing people in certain ways of how things should be done, but I've got a little bit of leniency towards like, oh yeah, I could do it this way, I could do that, I could not reach out to them, I could reach out to them. So there's a lot more creativity and space for me just to kind of do whatever the hell I want. And I think there's probably just less, it's more decentralized away from, or maybe it's further away from the micromanagement feeling of like, oh yeah, what are you doing? What are your KPIs? This is exact. It's more just like, okay, just go do that. And whatever way you foresee that's going to work out well, cool. Just make it happen.
Yeah.
Now I'd say more creative than less creative.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I'm always questioning when someone gets to like the CEO level of like, let's just say a mid-sized company, or I don't know, the people who produce the street lights or something like that. How much freedom do they have in being able to dictate, I want to do this? I suppose what has triggered this thoughts for me was Twitter. So Twitter's doing a lot of pretty interesting things. They're talking about adding podcasting in. I don't know if you've heard about the Blueksy, what they're doing with that, which is it's basically trying to create the Fediverse. Here's another word you might not have heard of.
Fediverse? I have not heard of this.
Dropping knowledge bombs here online.
What is Fediverse?
The Fediverse is basically, I'm just going to say, decentralized social media. So the Mastodon accounts, for example. There is the Mastodon service, which, for those who don't know, think Twitter, but a little bit less, little less pretty. It hasn't got as many people on it. It's not as, it doesn't have an algorithm. It doesn't have an infinite feed. It's just a single feed of, this is like the latest things that people in your...
Like old school Facebook, old school Instagram.
They call it an instance. So there's the podcasting social instance, and I've joined that, and I can basically just, my feed is dictated by people in the podcasting social area. So I get all of those, but then I can add, if I want, people from outside of it. So there's a no agenda one, for example.
Okay, gotcha.
So I could add that in, and I could add that into my feed, and then that would start appearing. or select individuals. So it's, I guess, being able to be a bit more curated yourself, like the responsibility is on yourself
like
to create the
self-curation
experience.
to create that.
So you're not getting fed the algorithms of this is likely to interest you because people who are similar
Like this,
to you
also
or
like
you
that.
like this, etc., etc. It's like, no, you have to go out, you have to put in the work, but you're going to get stuff that is more directly impactful and interesting to you.
Yeah.
Maybe, depends how you use it. And so I believe Twitter is trying to do something similar to that.
Okay.
Where they'll
Fediverse.
they'll federate out, and so they'll have
Gotcha, okay,
the cryptocurrency, and maybe they'll have the cryptocurrency Fediverse, and maybe even more niche into that is the Cardano or the Bitcoin or Ethereum. Then they'll have, I don't know, the Australian Fediverse or blah blah blah. So it's just being able to almost silo yourself in many ways, because at the moment it's like you get everything is there, but because there's so much stuff, it's kind of it's almost unsearchable in a way. Like you're not particularly going to get so that's basically one of another things that Twitter is doing. And so I was always wondering, like, how much freedom does Jack Dorsey actually have to be like, no, Twitter is not going to be this thing anymore. I want to completely change it. I want to add the Lightning Network onto every single account. I want everyone to have a wallet. Things like that.
I mean, I would say that. I mean, one, Jack Dorsey's no longer on Twitter anymore, so Jack probably doesn't give shit.
Well,
he probably does.
I think he has input into one of the projects, that Blue Sky one. I think he's
no longer CEO, but maybe he's got input into stuff.
Correct.
I mean, I think as you go up the higher up the chain, I think you'd have like some things where you'd have been creative when you're at the lower levels, and they would inversely then get less creative, and then the other aspects that would be much more creative. So I think, like, as a CEO of one of those major companies, you could actually say, like, if you're thinking, I don't know, let's just say for some reason you think that not Bitcoin, not Ethereum, but like, I don't know, pick some real shit freaking coin, like crypto coin or something else. Yeah. Like, imagine you go, oh, I think Hosky is going to be the number one coin. We should just do this. I mean, I think that you have the creative flow to be like, no, I want to do this because I think this is the future, la la la. So you do have the creativity to kind of put that forward, as opposed to, like, if you're someone down at the very lower level, like, even if you think that, like, it ain't really probably going to get actioned. Then they've got, I mean, boards or whatever that will stop that, or other places that might mitigate that sort of thought process. But I guess you have more creativity in the ideas you put forward, but then inversely, then there's other things where you're less creative because you're just restrained by, I don't know, financial markets, because you're actually operating as a listed company, everything like that.
Another interesting one, which you might find intriguing, is, have you heard of ShapeShift?
ShapeShift.
Yeah, and in particular, the guy who created it, called Erik Vorhees. No. So he's a OG Bitcoiner. He was speaking at the Bitcoin conferences in 2011, 2013. Okay. He used to be a maximalist, and then started to play around with Ethereum and sort of saw the light in a way, and was like, oh, yes, Bitcoin is the only one which is really sound money. Like, that's what it does. That is amazing. But these other ones can do some really cool stuff in the decentralized finance or decentralized identity. Like, there's value in them, not of them particularly being money, but what they can add, I guess, like what they can do and impact in the real world. And he's got a pretty cool story about how he has all this Bitcoin from back in the OG days, didn't want to create a tax event, and so sort of like converted that to USDC, took out like a collateral loan on that, and then was able to buy a house without actually having to sell anything. He was just using all of these DeFi protocols. It was just like, damn, that's pretty, like, that's a real life thing, buying a house without having to pay a shit ton of tax.
Yeah. I'm sure the IRS is going to be looking and see how they might try to get them. Interesting,
yeah. They're always looking out for those things. Anyway, he had this company called ShapeShift, which was essentially it was a centralized exchange, but it wasn't a centralized exchange. They were basically like, you send in your coin and we will never hold it. You will get back what you're trying to buy instantly. So if you want to...
okay, gotcha.
It's so close to
almost like an
Uniswap
intermediary type of deal. Okay.
A little bit like that. But he was finding that he was going through all these regulations. They had to start implementing KYC, otherwise they were going to get, just regulated out of existence. And the company was taking like a real bad turn for it. They lost, he said, 99% of their custusers when they started doing KYC.
Oh, of course, everyone who was doing it was basically trying to do it to get away from the taxation events.
Exactly. Yep. So they went down this path for I think a year or two and was like, this is unsustainable. I can't. It goes against everything that I care about, essentially. Like he was, he's an OG Bitcoiner, so he's thinking about these things a long time ago. And he basically converted his company into a DAO, which I thought was pretty cool. So he managed to convince the board, like, hey, everything that is in our company structure, I want to convert this into something that's decentralized, where there's governance from our actual like shareholders, which are now going to become token holders. So I think they've got like the Fox token, and they went through this whole process of basically trying to get his company so that there's no place where the US regulatory commission or whatever can send an email, because it's like, or a letter, because it's like, we don't own it. Like, no one owns this thing. It's up to everyone. There's no point sending a little letter to me. I have a little bit of control over the system, but
not all
but
of it.
I can't dictate what's going to happen. And that's kind of encouraging, because I'd always basically just heard that companies really can't, I'm going to use a word I hate, pivot from their blockbuster. They were too stuck in the mire that they couldn't see the future coming and not even completely change their business. All they needed to do was implement a couple of new things. But they could have still been in the movie business. But
or something around it.
It's not like they needed to start selling couches. But they still couldn't do that. And so I was just wondering, like, how much freedom, how much creativity do people at the very top have? Start a company, Juan. Show me some of your creativity.
Yeah, I think it would be, you would become more creative because you just know you can do more, and then be restricted by the environment that you decide to play.
Maybe even the
pressure. I think the creativity would also map like almost linearly to how much freedom the environment that you're playing in. Like if you're in let's say, pick a random country that has like no laws, then I reckon you can be real creative. You can be real creative. Like I would imagine setting up something in like Cambodia or something.
Okay, so who's the most creative person in the world, do you reckon? Is it the person who's just in? What's that country that no one knows about? I think it's called Atria. Have you heard of that?
No idea. No.
It's like an African country, which it's sort of like North Korea level dictatorship in a way, but I guess
just because an environment allows maybe the possibility of creativity or do what you want, doesn't mean, I guess, that the person exists there to actually do that. I would have to say, like, I reckon that the most creative person out there would have to be somebody who's just really well versed across like lots of different domains, and just could put together lots of those different examples into like, oh well, you could do this or you could do that or do whatever. So it's probably someone working like at Google or someone working at somewhere else where they're like, they've just got so many cross ventures that they can just see lots of opportunities.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would say they'd have to be financially wealthy enough that they can do whatever they want. Like, they're not restricted by like, oh, I have to do something I hate doing. So I imagine that they'd have to be wealthy enough to do that.
To be able to do that.
Yeah.
And what is this country?
I can't find it, man. I'm trying to search it up at the moment.
I've never heard of that country before.
It's this tiny little one. Like, it's a pretty sad story. Etria.
Etria.
Eritrea. Is that how it's?
Maybe I'd say Eritrea.
No. It's more like Etria, something like that.
I mean, it's got an R after the E, so it's Eritrea. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
won independence from Ethiopia in 1993 after a 30-year war, but has been plagued by repression at home and tense relations with its neighbours, spotted by Sudan. There you go.
Yeah, I've heard it's basically sort
recent.
of like the North Korea of Africa.
Gotcha.
Basically.
There you go.
So,
jeez, terrible.
Yeah, not a place.
not a good place. Yeah, no. There was another item. So going back to the floods, and it's something maybe slightly adjacent to it. Something that I commented to you. I did comment this to you off the podcast, but wanted to just talk about it a bit more. And that was, I guess, once you almost open up the sudden slide towards a certain reaction once it's actually been established once. So,
oh wait, can you repeat that?
So it's like sort of the sudden slide towards a certain reaction once it's established. Once you have established it one time, you have got more propensity to start suddenly sliding towards that same.
And you mean like an emotional reaction?
It could be emotional reaction, actual action. So the example here that I was going to say was COVID came along, right?
Correct.
So with COVID came along, there was a lot of directions with stay at home or do this.
Yes.
Wear your mask, get your booster, etc., 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 right? And most people did actually follow along because they wanted to follow what was being said and what the science at the time said, whatever you may believe. Cool. Now, what we had recently had here in Brisbane was obviously the floods, right? Now, again, there was a couple of directives that came out from our government where it was, flooding, do not go out, right? It was suggestions. It was suggestions like, you shouldn't go out.
There was helicopters flying around this area on, I believe it was the Monday, so it was the day after we did the podcast.
Yes.
And they were flying around with loudspeakers basically being like, move away from the water.
There you go.
Move away from the water.
Which fine.
Yeah.
Again, that's for people's safety. Okay, maybe some understand that. But then something that just happened recently was there was a big rain cell coming through. Big rain, right? And this wasn't, for everyone at home, this wasn't a hurricane. This wasn't a tornado. This wasn't like hailstorm or something. This was just like a big amount of rain's coming, right? Now, there was a decision made by the government of, hey, take your kids out of school. Like, school's closed for tomorrow, or like from midday till end of the day, and tomorrow. Schools are closed.
That didn't make too much sense to me. Why would you take them for 3 hours?
Well, I guess maybe trying to Iron Man them is...
Steelman,
that's the one. Steelman them, it's Iron Man. Steelman them would be like, perhaps, if there's people going out at like 4 or 5 o'clock to pick up kids from school and there's flooded roads, then it means that people are going to be going over those flooded roads and can't get back to their house. Okay, I get that. Or maybe there are other reasons. But it wouldn't be something that 5 years ago you would have ever seen. You would never have seen like a heavy rain's coming through and people go, like a government suggesting like, school closed. Like, take a school home. Can you imagine us being at school, dude? And it being like, it's going to rain lots tomorrow.
I don't know. Did we ever have a day off? I think I remember...
There was one day where it was really hot and the water bubblers stopped working.
Okay.
There was one day, although now that I'm thinking about it, that might not have been high school. I think that was primary school. I had a day in primary school where it might have been like year 5 or year 6, where it was like 37 degrees and the water bubblers stopped working. And they were like, okay, you might have to go home.
Yeah, I remember cheering for the thermometer to go up like an extra degree or two because then, there's some rule related to it. Like if it's 40 degrees or 40-something degrees, you shouldn't be at school. Go home or something like that. Like unless there's aircon or something. I'm not
something
sure.
like that. Yeah, okay. So, but in any case...
but yes, never had like a big, this is happening, you need to go home. Like September 11th, we stayed at school on that day. I remember. Like I was in before school.
Yeah.
We just... saw it and then
I mean,
more school.
So it got me thinking more so like I was like, do we talk about it just more broadly? But I thought, okay, I'll talk about it more like just individually because there's not much we can comment about like from a government perspective, because I would go like my general thinking is, okay, now that we've opened up this Pandora's box of the government being able to say like you should stay home because this is happening, how many more times or what other things going to happen that we're going to see suggestions like this, or perhaps like enforcements. Like imagine if all of a sudden it's going to be a really rainy weekend and you get told you can't go to the park.
Yeah,
it's closed.
Not allowed to drive 10 kilometers beyond your...
Exactly. Yeah. So, but rather than going down the path, I thought, okay, well, maybe personal. Is there something like, is there an anti-habit, or has there been something that you've allowed to develop? Like you've opened up Pandora's box and now it's kind of stuck around. It's not something that you want to follow, but you've almost developed it and like, so to give you my example. So I was like, okay, how would I put this to me? And I went, I know. TikTok, right? Like, so TikTok's come out, right? Now, before TikTok, I wasn't actually much of a person that would flick through Instagram and flick through Facebook. I would look at it. Shit, can't get and take my sticks.
Good.
I wouldn't be flicking through. Like, I wouldn't spend an hour, like, going through Instagram. No freaking way.
Yeah.
No, YouTube. I wasn't a big YouTuber either. Like, I wouldn't be someone who would be watching, like, go down the YouTube rabbit hole. Barely, like, I reckon I could count it in 2 hands. Maybe that it's ever happened. But now TikTok's occurred, like, it come out, and I've used it. It's almost like opened up Pandora's box where now I find myself going like, oh, it's entertaining. Yeah, I can find myself doing that for half an hour. But it's also sort of like build this anti-habit where if like I'm doing that, it's like, oh, well, I can do that on Instagram too. Or I can do this on this other social media platform. And I go, ooh, I've opened up this Pandora's box where I've allowed this to happen once where it wasn't happening before. And now it's become like an acceptable practice to be able to do it. Now, I'm not doing that all the time. But there's often times where I'm like, oh, I'll just flick through because let's say between I'm going to do something at 12:30 and at 12 o'clock. Oh, I'll just lay down and just like look some TikTok as opposed to reading or doing something else.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But is it something that as a whole you look back at and say, my life would be better if I didn't do this? You know?
Well, in the scenario, like in the same example of like governments mandating this, it's not like, could you say that your life is worse off by that? Yes, okay, I think you can make some conversations, like some arguments toward it. I can probably make arguments that, yes, my life could have been better because I could have been more productive. But I don't know whether you could really, like, I could solidly say that either. I would just say that I could be more productive, or I could be, maybe I'd say wasting time less. But what am I wasting time for, I guess? Like, what is that time that I would be using it? I'm not sure. But I still feel like it's an anti-habit that I've allowed Pandora's box to open, and now it's become more common practice than not.
Yeah. Okay. One that this is not one that's happened to me, but could happen. Sort of, you know, I've got like the box in front of me, and I'm starting to peek in right now. It's not like I've let it out, and it's just here now.
Okay,
it's
you
me.
Can see it. You can like see it.
You can see Kara, and you might even witness this progression over the next month or two, and that is allowing myself to be more spontaneous. So. Allowing / forcing, because it's a little bit of both. Okay. So at the moment, I'm not what you would call a particularly spontaneous person. It's just not something that I do. If I get a random event and someone says, "Yeah, do you want to do this?" I'm not generally like, "Yes,
yeah, hell yeah, let's do it." Yep.
I'm more like, does that fit in with my current schedule and what I have planned? Perfect example. You suggested this evening going out. Now I already had plans to go to like a movie that's going to take 3 hours. This big one, bloody Batman. And then it's sort of like, I did have in the back of my mind, tomorrow I don't have a lot to do. There's a bunch of monthly goals that I want to get working on, particularly ones that sort of need to just sit down for a couple of hours. This is like to do with the lightning nodes and creating a self-hosted podcast and things like that. So those ones I'm sort of like, you saw my initial reaction. It was like, maybe I'll see how I'm feeling. Now, one of the things I'm noticing is the more spontaneous I am, the more sort of like friendly I am in a way. So the more I'm able to have conversations like we had just before the podcast started with two lovely ladies who walked by, and I saw them looking at it and sort of like gave them a smile. Normally I'd sort of look away and then they'd just go on their way.
Now, let's be clear. This is not Karen's reaction for like, oh, I don't want to be happy and engaging with people. More like, oh, I just don't want to engage right now because I'm about to do this. I'm thinking of something else, and it's my like habit. You're about to do something.
Pretty much, yeah. I enjoy conversations to a point. I'm definitely, if I speak 3 hours a day with random people, like if I meet 6 new people in a day and I have a 20-minute conversation with each of them, I'm going to be exhausted. I'm just going to be totally done by the end of the day. So I am sort of like allowing this box to open a little bit because I know it's going to have good benefits. It's going to make me more approachable for people, but also me approach more. And one of my goals was to do 5 approaches. I've already pretty much done that this month because the other night my dancing class got cancelled. Fuck it, I'm going to go out. Doesn't matter what. I'm not going to even. I purposefully did not check the websites to see if there would be salsa dance classes in Cloudland because I knew if I saw that there wasn't,
it might talk you out.
I would, pretty much. So I said, If it's not on, I'll find something else to do. If one doesn't come, doesn't matter. I'll go walk around myself. I'll do something. I'll whatever. So that was sort of spontaneity and being like, I'm just going to do it. Doesn't matter what. The problem with this is you can lose track of things. Like you can let things slip. Yep. So, there is always the podcast that needs editing. There's a constant.
There's a good balance between like spontaneity, but also the discipline to be doing the things that you need to get done.
And I have somewhat allowed myself some spontaneity in the past, but I've never had something that I would say is all on me, as in the sense like it's all on me basically to make sure these podcasts get done and go out and the things are edited correctly and et cetera, et cetera. So there could be like a little bit of a risk coming that, oh shit, I forgot to upload that episode. I forgot to do the chapter titles and things like that. So that's definitely one which is like it could become an anti-habit in that I could develop this and then be like, shit, this is actually having some problems. Like it's having some problems.
Like you've allowed yourself to like have spontaneity, but now it's like traveling towards like you're doing it too much. Like shit, why did I begin this in the first place?
Yeah, like making too many plans, pushing things off because that's what I need to do. I need to push things off and not overthink it. That's the whole definition of spontaneity. Don't overthink it. Just do it. But yeah, I find when I don't think about things too much, shit gets missed. Like So that's probably one of them.
Okay, that's a fine balance. Yeah. Okay, no, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Speaking of, I guess, overthinking and thinking things through, are there good times to be irrational? Are there times where it is best to do something that you know is in your own worse, like, self-interest? So it's like, it's not going to be beneficial for you.
Well, I think that's different in a way. Irrational. I think it's different to being irrational.
Well, what is being rational? Being rational is, let's look up a definition.
Following logical thinking or something like that?
Yeah.
Something.
So this would be the best way of...
I mean, just one example that came to mind of, maybe somewhere where you would be wanting to be irrational would be art. Like, would the rational thing be to, let's say, like, I'm not going to be selective to a particular example, but I could just imagine that there would be some sort of artist out there that went, actually, the rational thing here is that I paint in a more expected way.
Red works well with this color according to the color wheel spectrum.
But they've gone, actually, I'm going to be irrational and just put, like, all sorts of shit all messed up and, succeeded, made it work. And it was because of the irrationality of that choice that maybe it wasn't exactly because of that, maybe it was because of who they are or their network or something else, but there was an irrational choice and it came back to actual success.
Okay.
So I would say, like, that's an example that just popped in my mind of, like, is it always better to be rational? I would say not always.
Okay, all right. Let me modify my initial question. And so what brought this up for me is I'm reading Reasons and Persons by Derek Parfit. And this is probably the philosophy book I've been looking for many a year.
Okay.
Which is...
It's readable?
Yes, so it was published, I believe, 1982-ish, something like that.
Okay, so recently. Yep. In philosophy standards.
Yeah. And it's set out in that way where he is sort of like opening avenues, closing it shut, opening an avenue, closing it shut, and coming to like definitive answers and spending a lot of time on the definition of words, on really investigating deep into particular things. And so he is...
Sounds like an original Mere Mortals.
That's it, man.
Damn.
That's it. And so he is... the basic... It starts off, I'm only 20, 30, 40 pages into the book. Okay. And he starts off with the theory of self-interest. So basically, the best thing for someone to do in their life is to create the best life for themselves, essentially like that. A real broad... I'll put up the definition so you can see it on your screen whilst looking. But it's like a real broad... Like, there's no ambiguity. It's, it's sort of almost a circular reasoning. Good is good because good is good. Yep. That sort of thing. Like, the best life for a person is the life that they choose to have because it's good, because it's the best life, that sort of thing. And he then is going down these different paths of investigation, and one of them is, the most rational thing for someone to do is to to use rationality to create the best life for themselves. And so the question I'm sort of getting at is it good to be irrational and sort of therefore do something that you know is going to be bad for yourself? Is that ever acceptable? Is it ever acceptable to, knowingly be in, like, I don't know, a car accident, you're really pissed off with this person, things escalate, and you have, let's just say, a baseball bat or a golf club in your trunk.
Yep.
And then you, like, pick it up and you have a moment of clarity and you're like, if I assault this person, my life is going to be worse for this. And you're really thinking clear, and you're like, would it be good to be irrational now and just hit
and do so,
and not even think about it? So that's an extreme example.
But I get now what you're talking about. I would still say, yes, there are examples like exactly like that where I could envision that being irrational could lead to positive outcomes, to perhaps a better life. I would say that would be very few. So maybe, less than 1% where those scenarios would actually play out. So one that just comes to me would be like things that wouldn't have happened from like that serendipity perspective because you're not being irrational. Let's just say you've got a flight tomorrow to London at 8 in the morning. And what's a rational thing to do? Get a good night's sleep. Wake up early, go there, make sure you don't miss your flight. But a friend of yours goes, hey, we're going to... Guess what we're going to?
We're going to Cloudland, or we're going to Dirty Sultans.
We're going to Dirty Sultans, and we're going to have a couple of drinks. And we're going to have like a massive night out. I think, moment of clarity, you go, okay, the rational me says that's probably not a good idea. I've got all this stuff tomorrow. Irrational, you go, ooh, it's going to be bad for me. Let's do it anyways. However, then you've introduced serendipity into your life. Maybe you meet someone else out there, and all of a sudden maybe you meet like a new business partner, maybe you meet like your future partner or something like that, because it introduces like this thing that you might not have done, and then you encounter with someone. Now, that could happen, so that something irrational has turned positive, but I would say that, again, flip those scenarios 100 times, and only probably like one of those times does it come out to be like positive.
Yeah.
So
I think in this case, the argument would be saying you have like the most available data, and the most available data suggests probability wise it's not going to be a good idea for you to go out and get smashed and then likely miss your flight, that sort of thing.
I would also place it up against how much, like, say, a rational choice is maybe the safe choice or the annoying choice, but when you go down the path of rationality, you would have to look into probably like the risk factor, right? So risk factor of going down that path, the probability of that risk factor, then compared to the probability of like could something really great happen out of this as a probability as well. So like, to your extreme example, if you go down this path, you got this real clarity and you go, okay, I could be irrational and hit this person with a baseball bat. What's the probability that I'm going to end up in jail is going to be really bad for me? Extremely high.
Yeah.
What's the probability that this is going to come out really good for me, or like something that I'm not haven't thought about?
It'll improve your golf swing, and then you win the next tournament.
Exactly, right? Now, so that
because you got that one extra swing of practice.
So that like view of irrationality, you go, no, that doesn't make sense. Like the odds doesn't set up. But let's go this example, flying to London, right? And I go, okay, the irrational thing is going to bed, irrational would be going out. However, let's just go, okay, what's probability of this being like really bad? Okay, well, not too bad. Maybe I don't sleep at all, and maybe I'm hungover, but I can make it. But I can be able to make it. And the worst is like I missed the flight. That's
classic
obviously
Juan
the worst,
mentality. That's
right?
exactly how Juan's brain
so
works.
But then you go, what's the probability? You go, look, to be honest, the probability of actually missing this flight, like to do this, it would have to be a really bad night. And this is the level of badness that it would be. But the probability of something really good happening that you don't expect it, even though it's an irrational choice, you might come out and be like, oh, okay, actually, maybe it is high. Like maybe, what if I've said this to you, right? You go to Dirty Sultan, but on that particular night, it's a night out, it's a night out for crypto girls who've been there since 2012, right?
And the photographers.
Then you go, ooh, it's still irrational, but there's a high probability here that there might actually be people who I want to interact with.
Yeah.
So while it's still irrational, then maybe you go, okay, there's a reason why going to irrationality, even though the rational is a safe choice and what you probably should do. Maybe you're ready to take on the risk because there's some serendipity there that you'll want to actually accomplish or get through.
Yeah.
So, but by the by, I think most of the time you're going to find yourself that the rational choice is probably the better choice.
Well, the funny thing is this all sounds like hypotheticals, but this Australian girl I met whilst traveling, faced this exact situation, and she chose to get really messed up with her friends.
She chose the irrational choice, yeah?
And came very, very close to missing her flight. Forgot things that she needed.
Yep.
Had to get it shipped over to her in Mexico, of all places. Get a new... yeah.
Did she say anything about that it was worth it?
It's hard to tell.
Okay.
It's hard to tell because I met her not long after she came, and so she was dealing with the aftermath of...
all of that
of
sort
the
of stuff,
pain of having to get things shipped to her, of trying to get a new phone, fair. All of these things. The other question, which is sort of related to this, is, okay, would you ever see yourself, if you could have a pill of irrationality that would just make you completely irrational, would you ever see yourself taking this?
No way. Yeah,
no way.
No way. Yeah. Again, it goes back to the whole, yes, just because one time it works out really well, I think a majority of time it wouldn't work out well. So.
Yeah. I want to present a little argument that this guy made, which I thought was really cool. I quite enjoyed it.
To take a pill to always be irrational.
To not always, but to, for a period of time, make yourself completely irrational. So every single choice that you make has no reason nor rhyme behind it. Imagine the craziest person you've ever met and you're like, I have no idea how their brain works. That sort of thing. Why did they say that thing? Why did they just shake their arm for no apparent reason? Why did there's no answer behind all the whys. It's just
no reason. Yeah.
And this was a little this is the other reason I like this book. He comes up with these hypotheticals and you're like, oh, that's a really good point. This is something where it does make sense. And so it's called Schelling's Answer to Armed Robbery. And basically the scenario is this. A man breaks into my house. He hears me calling the police, but since the nearest town is far away, the police cannot arrive in less than 5 minutes. I was reading that directly from here. Can't open the file. Good. I'm going to have to do my impression of it. The man, there's a safe in your house, and you're there with your kids, and he's basically, locked the door behind him. You're locked in with him, and he's armed. He's got a knife. And so he says... open the safe. Now, it's best for you to not open the safe because he's going to steal all your gold and run away. And there's essentially nothing you can do about it. There's no the probability of you getting your jewels or your gold or whatever it is back is slim.
Sure.
The other point that he then makes is I've got a knife. You've got your kids here. If you don't open the safe, I'm going to harm your kids. Well, rationally, the best thing for me to do is to open the safe. Stab my own kids, get the problem out of the way, and then it's all good.
Yeah.
But once again, you don't want your kids harmed. Rationally, that's the best life for you is a life where they're not harmed.
Yep.
And so his argument was imagine if you had a pill that would last for 15 minutes, and you take this pill and it makes you completely irrational. And so then he... would then be I'm going to kill your kids, and you're like, great, that sounds awesome. And the robber is now well, my power of threatening has now gone. I'm going to harm you. Oh, cool. Can you push it in further? I've always wanted to know what it feels like to have something pointy coming out of my spine.
Yep.
So it's almost the most rational thing for you to do would be to delve into irrationality for 15 minutes until the police come, and then you'll all be good. Actually, just talking through this now makes me sort of realize the flaw in this argument is if you take the irrationality pill and he asks, open the safe, you'd maybe just be like,
yeah,
okay.
have it. Yeah.
So I guess it sort of breaks down in that point. But I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Imagine if there was a pill of irrationality.
I get what...
Would that ever be useful?
I guess maybe the way that I took it away was that... because you're not doing the rational, the expected action that they're taking. So, say, a robber doing that is because he's got that involves, I've got power over you because I can do this. If you then disarm that by being like, well, I don't care, just do it anyways, then it does take away from the power that he's trying to exert. So perhaps that does stop him. I mean, one that I would be like in that example is like, well, what happens if he just kills you then and kids and just takes the stuff? Well, okay, that irrationality probably didn't help you much.
Well, I guess like the argument in this case is he is rational, so he realizes, oh, if I murder these kids, like it's going to be worse off for me, because then probably I'm going to get chased by the police more. And
perhaps, but also, you know, if someone's threatening it, there is a difference between threatening and doing it, but it doesn't mean that he isn't prepared to do it.
Yeah. To
perhaps not get caught. Maybe he'll feel like, rationally to him, he feels like, oh, getting caught is worse than actually just doing that and getting away with it. Maybe. But I also think that whether, and maybe it's an interesting question, but whether rationality or irrationality also combines with emotion, right? So could you be rational, but your emotional state be different, right? I think that there are, and this probably deserves a longer conversation, but you could be rational or irrational, but then be very emotional. And I wonder whether that would drive a decision beyond your rationality. So what if you could be rational and have 22 choices that are rational, but perhaps your emotion will drive one of those decisions depending on your state or something else, right? I'm just thinking in those manners that, you know, even if you take a pill that makes you like, oh, be irrational, so there's no why, but you have an emotional driver, so here would be like, well, you love your kids. So even if you're wanting to be irrational, would your emotions influence that to take a decision down a certain path? I don't know. I haven't even looked at the definition enough to say whether rationality is taking or not taking emotions into play.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things you can then get into, such as... I had it in my mind just a second ago. No,
like I don't think that it is enough to say that irrationality is that there is no meaning behind it. Like I don't think that doesn't strike me as being true in whatever sense. Like that's not to me like, oh, that doesn't sound like the opposite of being rational. Because like if I was to, and we'd have to look at the example, like a definition, but I would imagine that rationality is something along the lines of, you know, doing the expected thing that doesn't lead to harm or doesn't, like some definition like that. I don't know that the direct opposite is like, you know, doing things that don't have any meaning. I actually think that, you know, maybe the direct opposite is actually things that have direct harm to you, right? So I would probably have to look into the definition because I'm just talking out my ass here.
Yeah, well, I was going to, the point I was going to make was like, we've sort of been talking about it like rationality is a one thing. Like you're either rational or irrational. But of course, like almost all things, it's a spectrum. So you can
dichotomy.
It's a dichotomy. So you could decide to be like, it makes sense to act like a little bit crazy in this situation because it'll get the party started, or and maybe it'll be beneficial to me if I am stuck in jail with murderers to act like a complete lunatic because that has a power in some way. It's like, what's this guy going to do? Well, threats don't work on him.
I think we'll have a separate conversation about this when we talk about our next musings on truth-telling and all that. So I would include a little bit of rationality.
Which has already come out, so the previous musings.
Oh, that's the one that come out? Okay, so we would have had a deeper conversation, I reckon, around some rationality and rationality with truth as well.
A little bit, yeah. That'll tie into it.
Good.
Coolies. You got anything else?
Nothing else for me. No, that's it. Mere Mortalites.
Cool. All right, well, what's the most rational thing for you to do, Mere Mortalites, at home? It's to send us some boostergrams. So this is a value for value podcast.
The most irrational thing you could do is to send us your life savings. But stay rational and just send...
I mean, this is a good argument for why we need irrationality. If you had a pill of irrationality, take that pill, send us all your life savings. Send us however much Bitcoin you have. Yeah,
but no, it is definitely a value for value enabled podcast. So all we ask of you is if we have provided value to you from listening or watching our podcast, our conversations, our philosophizing in the park, then you are able to provide us value back.
Yes. So time, talent, or treasure. So talent is if you have if you're good at philosophy and you're like, they were making some poor points here, I'm going to send them through a book recommendation. This would be a good idea. Time would be like, those chapter works, I think I could create some better shit images than Kyron can. I'm going to send him through a couple. And then, of course, treasure, some Bitcoin. You can do that on any of the good podcasting apps, newpodcastapps.com.
Correct.
Look for one with value.
You can normally send between 2 to 5 if you'd like Bitcoin.
That's
feel free to send more
the general range. Yeah. That's our general recommendation. 2 to 5 bitcoins per minute of watching sounds about right.
Sounds about right. Yeah. Imagine if we were saying this in 2011 though, right? Like imagine somehow, it's 2011. It would be like, oh yeah, roughly about 2.5.
Some lunatic had somehow managed to hook it up to a podcasting app.
Dude, can you imagine that? Then people are just sending like 10 Bitcoin per minute.
Yeah, and then we're getting like pissy because they decide to send like 0.0001 satoshis or something, which is still like the equivalent of like $10 now.
Dang, yeah.
But yes, we do highly appreciate when you can do that. We read out all the boostergrams in our live episodes, so those are the musings, and it's a great way to interact with us. We appreciate the feedback. Get your name in on the show, some props, and yeah, it's just a fun new experience in this crazy, wacky world that we live in, Juan.
Oh yeah. All right, me more laughs. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the meanderings. Juan, out.
Karen drowning in the river, out.